Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here today. I'm very happy to welcome back John Barclay. Hey John.
Hello, Nicole. It's been a little while. It's nice to be back.
It has. We're happy to have you. John is here to show us how he crafts his images using some of our Topaz plugins. So I'm excited to see how he's been using some of the latest plugins recently. John is an award-winning freelance photographer based in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. He's a passionate photographer and enthusiastic workshop leader, leading workshops and tours around the world. Recently, John was invited to join National Geographic photographers Jonathan Kingston, DeWitt Jones, and Ricky Cook to co-lead the See the Light seminar in Molokai, Hawaii. In addition, John was personally selected by DeWitt to be part of the www.healingimages.org project, and he was the recipient of an excellent award from Black and White Magazine, or B&W Magazine. With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to John so he can start showing you what he's using Topaz for these days.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. I'll wait. Just hang with us, folks. We've got to do this magic switching of the screen. Show my screen. Are we good, Nicole?
Yes.
Good. Excellent. Well, again, thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure to do these. I enjoy it. Just a shout out to my buddy Scott, who's always so supportive, and Lori and Cindy and all those who have said they were going to join today. Thanks for coming back. I appreciate you doing that. And anybody new out there, hopefully we'll give you some things to think about. So with that, let me talk about philosophy just for a second, as I tend to do at the beginning of any of these webinars. My job today, I don't think, is to show you pretty pictures and get a result that's maybe perfect. Really, I see my job today as presenting you information, ideas, concepts, if you will, that you then can take those ideas and concepts, modify them, or use them specifically to create and craft the looks that you're specifically looking for. I do tend to cover a fair amount. Recognize these are recorded, and you'll be able to see it again shortly, a few days after. Usually Nicole will have that up, and so you can go back and review some of the things I've discussed. And then I do tend to repeat myself on purpose, because I know when I learn I need to hear things 2 or 3 times to really understand. So with that, let's get started. And today what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about Lightroom real quickly. Lightroom's gotten very good, and it has localized adjustments here and has split grads and all sorts of good things, and it's a wonderful piece of software. I use it. That's my front end for sure. But I want to just remind you that it doesn't negate the need or the option, maybe I should say, of using the various plugins, and especially the ones we're going to talk about today. So I've done a good job, I think, of this Burano scene out near Venice. But I just want to show you and take you back to Topaz Adjust, because that's where really they started, or the whole thing started for the folks at Topaz, and they kind of built the business around this wonderful plugin, and we tend to forget about it because we have these other plugins like Clarity and Detail and so forth available as well. So let's just jump into Topaz Adjust quickly here. And that, by the way, if you're in Lightroom and you right-click on the image, you're going to get Fusion Express. That's the tool that you need to install so that you can then receive this list, this menu, if you will, where you have the different plugins available, and this is going to show you the plugins that you have loaded. So we'll choose Adjust, and we'll hit Run. And I'm just going to make sure to go down to the bottom here and reset so that we're sure that we're working on a fresh image. Okay, so the interface, what's nice about all of the Topaz plugins, the interface is pretty much the same. So on the left side, you're going to have the different collections that you can click on and see the various choices here. As you roll over them, you're going to get a preview of these. If you click here, I just want to make sure you understand this one. Let's go back to the classic collection. If you click here, I'm on the left side where there's a grid. Then you're going to have a thumbnail preview, or really a preview of what's here. If you click on one of these previews, you will then get that particular look. Okay, so and you can go back, and here's the original. So let's say we wanted highlight recovery. We could click on that, and that's the preset you're going to see here being applied. As usual, for those who have been with me a million times, I don't tend to use the presets. They're great, especially for when you're new to the software, to give you an idea, but all it's doing is taking all of the sliders on the right side here and adjusting them. So because we have a lot to cover, really I want to just go to what made Adjust so great, and that's the adaptive exposure. And you'll see very quickly by sliding these two sliders how we can enhance this already good-looking photograph to have even more punch and depth and bring out some of the vibrance in the water and the colors and so forth. So adaptive exposures, I like to say, is like an auto adjust on steroids. We have this slider which we can pull all the way over until we make it look garish, which we don't want to do. But that would be sort of like an automatic exposure adjustment with another program where they only have one button. Here we can vary that automatic exposure as much as we want, and in conjunction with the regions. And so the region says, how many of those tonalities do I want to affect? The further to the left of this region slider is, only the brights and the darks are going to be affected. If I pull this to the middle, the brights, the darks, and more of the brights and darks, until I pull this all the way over here, and now all of the tonalities are going to be affected. And so by pulling it over here, just the lights and the darks. By pulling it over here, all the tonalities in the image are going to be adjusted. So it's a balancing act is really what this is. But I want you to see how much of an adjustment, and like I call this an image pop. Here's before. Look specifically in the foreground on the walkway there. Look in the foreground bottom left where the reflections are. I'm going to let that go. Now all of a sudden you have a lot more detail, a lot more clarity and brightness in the foreground of this image. The colors here are popping more. The sky has gotten darker blue. There's more definition with the clouds against that blue sky. I can see more in the water here. So please don't, the purpose of this quick little demonstration is please don't forget that Topaz Adjust is really the bread and butter behind a lot of what goes on in a number of the programs, and we'll see it again even in the black and white program when we talk about that a little bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. You can look at other webinars to talk about the details and the color and the noise and all those things. I just wanted to remind you that even on a good image coming out of Lightroom, a little bit of quick adjusting in something like Topaz Adjust is worthy of a look, because it really adds a lot of pop to the image. I'm going to hit cancel just to quickly get out of there. Let's go and do another quick example here so that we can get through a number of things. Let's go here. And I want you to notice on the right side here in Lightroom, I've done a fair amount of adjustments. Matter of fact, I've even used a split grad for the sky to darken up the sky a little bit here. And I've done my white balance adjustments. I've made a black point and a white point. So I've done a lot, and quite honestly, this Tuscan scene looks pretty good right out of the box. I'll go into Edit In. Again, I'm going to go to Fusion Express from Lightroom. That's going to get me to my menu and be able to see my Topaz plugin choices. Things are going a little slower. In the old days with webinars, I would make smaller JPEGs so they would go a little faster. Here, obviously, we're working on a raw file, and means I need to babble on a little bit. Okay, so let's go to clarity this time. Probably my favorite of all programs that Topaz has come up with. Why? Well, because as good as Topaz Adjust is, and I still use it, clarity is a little more gentle and really is best used for contrast adjustments and apparent sharpness. Now, this one I'm going to spend a little bit more time on because, again, I use this a lot. Most every image will eventually go through clarity near the end of my workflow. Once again, left side, all of these presets. And I'm going to choose landscape this time, and I'm going to go ahead this time and show you a couple presets because clarity, they tend not to be, you can overdo it, but they tend not to be as overdone as some other other plugins. And again, you can start to see the various choices here of what these presets look like. So let's come back up here to color and contrast boost. I'm going to click this. Now, I don't know about you, but I was amazed when I hit that particular one because it made it look like we had some nice gold light, which we did. We were there at that time of the day. It darkened up the sky. I'm going to click on this to give you before. Here's before. There's after. I usually wait a little bit because I know you folks are seeing a little bit of a delay, so hopefully that's helping. So once again, all it's doing is placing these sliders on the right side to a specific pattern that they're predetermining. Well, there's a good chance they might not be exactly what you need, so let me just give you a way or some thoughts on how to go beyond that preset and make sure that you're getting really what you want. First thing I'm going to do is the top right, I'm going to make sure I can see a histogram, because anytime you're doing adjustments to contrast, you are going to shift your data. And when you shift your data, you might be blowing out highlights or blocking up details on the left side. So the left side of your histogram is blacks, rights are white. And one of the nice things that they have is this tone level capability. Again, I'm in the clarity tab here on the right. These are the contrasted adjustments that are being done by the preset, but it is shifting this data, and it's making it a little bit too far to the left, maybe a little too dark. I can come here to the black level slider and pull it over a little bit more to the right, and now I've pulled that data completely away from the left side, which I want to do. Now those trees are not quite as blocked up, and it's not quite as dark as it was before. After. Okay. So what's happening with these sliders here? Well, you know how you have clarity as one slider in Lightroom and or Adobe Camera Raw? Think about this as clarity broken down into 4 sliders, and it's the reason I like it so much. So it's working on a micro contrast, yeah, I'll be able to talk, a micro contrast level, a low, a medium contrast, and a high contrast level. It's basically the size. Think about it as the size. Size is a small contrast. And so watch what happens. To me, these trees are maybe still a tad dark. I just happen to know that that's probably going to be affected by the medium contrast. If I bring that down a little bit, now that makes that medium contrast area of which those trees are, there's no blocked up shadowy areas in those anymore. So again, a little bit of review here. Go and click on your histogram and see what your adjustments are doing if you're choosing to use the left side presets. And make sure that you recover some blocked up shadows or blown out highlights by using your tone level sliders. So the black, move it to the right, it's going to bring that away from the left side here. If I did not have blown out highlights here, but if I did, I would come to the white slider here in the tone level area, pull it to the left so that I would recover those blown out highlights that are happening. Now for me, this yellow tonality here in the saturation is probably a little more than it needs to be. Well, how am I going to adjust that? I'm going to go to the hue, saturation, luminosity, and I'm going to roll open that, and here I have hue, saturation, and luminosity. Well, we can see what's happening here. In the luminosity, they're making an adjustment of plus 10 on the red. In the saturation, they're saturating everything by about plus 10, plus 5 for various ones. So if and I'm not going to take a lot of time here, but I might come back in, and I'm going to double click on this so I can do it easily. And I might make that 0. I might make the red 0. I might make the yellows 0. And now that took away some of that oversaturation. But again, remember, that was a preset. I don't want to just accept what the preset has. I want it to be my picture. I want to craft this to be the way I want it to look. And so when I was critical about it, as much as I liked it, and by the way, oftentimes that's how we respond to things, is very viscerally. But then when we close our eyes or go away for, a drink and come back and we see what we did, we realize, oh my gosh, it's way overdone. You should do that. You should walk away, come back often when you're working, especially on color sensitive things, because we need to get rid of what we've been working on and come back at it fresh. And oftentimes I'll go, oh my gosh, what was I doing? So now if we go before, after, I think we can see that Clarity's done a great job of taking what we thought was a pretty well done photograph, But a couple things I want to point out. Not only have we adjusted colors and added some pop and some contrast, because that's what the clarity portion of this is doing, is adding contrast. Notice we're taking away that hazy look. And yes, I know Lightroom in the newest iteration has added that dehaze, and yes, it's good. But once again, it's one slider. Here, we're really doing the same thing, but we have the ability to use 4 sliders and work on it a little more carefully than Lightroom allows me to do. So just to kind of cement again, I'm going to reset everything and go way back to the beginning. So by hitting reset, I'm no longer using that preset, because I want to go through this as the way I would do. I would tend to not use a preset. I've learned and the way I've learned, by the way, is I look at what the presets are doing on this right side, and it's given me a clue as to how I might attack something in the future. So here's what I've learned to do. I've learned to take that micro contrast over to 30 or 40-ish, low contrast, not quite as much, and then oftentimes I'll bring these over the opposite way. Now in this one, it doesn't work quite as much because it's blocking these up, and so that medium contrast, we're going to want to come, we're going to come back this way a little bit, and that micro contrast is probably a little more than I want. Now that's a little bit better. So before and after, so just from a contrast, again, we see that, that haze going away, and we're giving it that nice crisp clarity type pop, and then I would come down in here and I would do my individual adjustments to saturation and hue and so forth. Again, I'm not going to do all that. I don't want to spend the time. I think we've covered enough on this. Love, love, love clarity, because to me it gives me the ability to be much more precise with my clarity, or clarity adjustments, which is giving me that apparent sharpness, and it's getting rid of that kind of hazy feel that oftentimes we can see in an image. And trust me, I would encourage you to go try it. Even when you think you have an image that is done, I would encourage you to go back, try clarity, and see if you don't agree with me that you're going to say, oh my, that really did have a soft, hazy feel to it. Glad I ran it through clarity. Okay. Let's go next, where we'll take a little bit more time. So now we're in New Zealand. I've had the pleasure to be in a couple of great places recently with some great people. So let's go, just to make this a little easier, I'm going to go ahead and open this in Photoshop. And you could do that, and there's reasons why sometimes I will, and we'll do a couple of those coming up, why I'll open things in Photoshop, because it gives me a little bit more control actually with layers and layer masks. Okay, so let's do a duplicate layer just to have it in case we want to have a discussion. Now here I'm going to go to my filters, go to Topaz Labs, and we're going to go to black and white effects. Okay, we'll let that open up. I'm just reading my notes to make sure that I show you what I want to show you. Okay, good. Let's hit reset again. Here's how it dumps it into black and white effects 2. Same thing. Notice the interface, which is nice, is the same on the left side. I'm going to stay with that traditional collection. I'm going to hit on the previews, and it's really a convenient way to go through those previews and see what you like. I tend to be drawn personally to the warm tones lately. I don't know why, but that's what I do. So I'm going to be selecting this one. So I just clicked on warm tone 1, and that brings it in to look like this. With black and white, though, here's my workflow, what I tend to do. Even though that might be a preset I would start with, the first thing I'm going to do is go to the top right and start clicking through the filters just like I might be using in the field, and see which filters I might like and how they're affecting the sky or the foreground and so forth. What I want you to pay attention to, and this is really important, notice this down here on the right side. So yes, I'm clicking the red, orange, yellow dots up here, but notice what's happening to these sliders down here as I do. If I hit red, what that is doing is it's placing it in the red and setting the strength slider to a certain location. If I like this look, but I wish it was a little stronger, here's the beauty. I can come down here and I can tweak this a little more. Notice the sky's getting a little darker as I tweak that more. That's huge, folks, right? So rather than just a one-click filter, I really have the whole spectrum of color that I can pull this slider anywhere I want it to create between that slider and the strength slider anything that I would really like to do in the black and white world. So it's very powerful. I'm going to bring this back to the red because that's where I want to be. So I'm going to hit the red dot again, get it to where I wanted, and I'm going to bring that strength slider up, and that's just the strength of that red filter that's happening there. Okay, so that's cool that I can have even more control over my black and white conversion. But look at this. If I go now and open up the one above it, so this is the color filter, which goes hand in hand with these filter dots up here. Now I have individual control over these tonalities in the conversion. I want to bring this foreground mossy, and I know it's of the green-yellow family that was around this rock. I want to make that brighter. So it should work that if I pull this yellow slider over, it does just that. It made this brighter. So anything that was in that tonal family is going to be adjusted. That's pretty cool. All right, same thing with the reds. If there's reds in there, it's going to brighten those reds up. There's not. But that blue sky, there's definitely going to be affected by this slider, and I can make that darker up on the sky should I want to. And I will just for this example. Okay, so far we've picked a preset. We're looking through the grid over there. Get rid of that, sorry, the grid. First thing I tend to do is look at what these do. And then I tweak that on this color filter panel and say, do I want more strength or less strength, or do I want to pull that slider and get something different? And then I work on the individual colors that might be in that image and try to brighten or darken those tonalities to work on that. Okay, so what next? Well, let's roll these up so we get those out of the way. You have local adjustment capability. Oops. Hold on. So this area here is starting to be a little dark for me and losing some of the detail at the base of these mountains on the right side. Well, dodging will brighten. So how do I use the dodging? I'm going to click on the dodge in the local adjustments panel, and then the brush size can be made bigger or smaller this way. Something like this size is going to be good. I want the opacity of that brush to be low. Why? Because if you have the opacity high, it's going to look like you hit it with a hammer. You're going to notice exactly what you did. It's much better to have a low opacity around 10.010 and understand that it's a cumulative brushed is what's happening. So when I brush once, it's going to do it at that low opacity. If I let go of the brush and then click again, if it's 10, it's now going to be 20. So it's cumulative. I want to make the hardness of the brush, somewhere in the middle for this. The edge aware engine in Topaz is really, really good. What does edge aware mean? It means it's going to help me stay only in the area that I want to be affected, and it's going to recognize the edge of something else like this ground down here or the snow up here and not affect that. So I want the edge aware to be high, so that it's helping me to only adjust what I want to be adjusted. Okay, so I'm set up. I've checked dodge because I want to brighten. I've made my brush size the way I want it, and then I hit the opacity is low so I can build it and make it look natural. The hardness of the brush is somewhat high with a little bit of feathered edge there, and then the edge aware is high so that it'll help me. Okay, and I start to paint here. And it's going to be hard to see because it is just a little bit. And if you look here in the mask, I don't know if you can see that, but it's just changed the mask to show where I'm painting. If I paint again, this is cumulative now, and now it's brought that up really nicely. Let me turn this off with a checkbox and see if we can see what's happened. I know this might be difficult in a webinar, but hopefully there it is before, pretty dark. I'm going to turn it back on, give it a second, and there it is a lot brighter. So you have control. I'm not going to spend the time, but I would come through this whole foreground and lighten this up even more, not touching the rock. So I would use the edgeware to do all of this and brighten this. If I wanted to, I could then click the burn. I could go make my adjustments to the sliders again, and that's all pretty good. And I could come up here into the sky and just burn this area here and make it a little darker. So burn, darkens, dodge, lightens, and it gives me the ability to truly start to come in here and craft the black and white image the way I want it to be. Okay, let's go back though to the conversion. Remember we talked about the very first thing was Topaz Adjust and how wonderful it is. Well, look what's baked right into black and white effects, adaptive exposure. Now we think we've done a good job on this image. Watch this. Okay, remember here's adaptive exposure. So this is, you know, auto adjust on steroids, like I said. And then here's that region slider, which says it's going to affect either the darks, whites if we're way to the left, or it's going to start to grab more and more of those tonalities until we have all of them the further I move it to the right. Let's see what happens if I move this quite a ways to the right on the region. So I want to affect a lot of those tonalities, and let me bring this over here. Holy cow. Hopefully you've had the same reaction that most people do when I do that. To me, that's night and day, folks. I mean, that changes the whole ball game. Please be very careful when you do this about blowing out highlights or blocking up shadows. Typically, your adjust engine is not going to block up shadows. As a matter of fact, it's done a nice job of even opening this area that we were working on with the localized adjustment here. But boy, did it make all this brightness up here in the foreground around the rock really wonderful, right? So let's see, what did we start with there? All the way back to that, pretty dramatic crafting of a black and white photograph in this wonderful little piece of software. If you didn't like the sepia toning of this, that's fine. You can go down to here and you can get rid of that sepia toning just like that. So all I did was go down to the finishing touches panel, and in the finishing touches we have film grain and quad tones and borders and edges and vignettes and all these good things. We'll talk about transparency in a minute. So if you're not a big fan of that, that's fine. I tend to like that look. We can certainly bring the strength of that down a little bit and make it look a little less in your face. Maybe something like that is a little nicer. So hopefully that gets your creativity or your creative juices inspired for using this great black and white tool. Now people will say to me, is this really what you use? Yes and no, in the spirit of honesty. I love black and white. It tends to be what I lean towards lately a lot. I will use this as a starting point, and then I will often bring it into Photoshop and really do some other type of techniques that I've learned from other photographers who I admire in the black and white world and to finish it. But yes, the answer is yes, I use a tool like this a lot to get me started. But because I want to be even more fine-tuned with what I'm doing, I'll tend to bring it into Photoshop and use some selection techniques and some dodging and burning techniques that I've learned there that I think give me even further control. But there's no reason why you shouldn't use this as your tool to get you started, especially if you're new to black and white. I think it's a wonderful tool. So I'll hit OK, and we'll keep that one because I kind of like this one. I might want to keep it. Good tool, black and white effects. We're going to take a minute further. Let me look at my time. Yeah, I think we're okay. Okay, so there it is. So from this color photograph, which turns into a nice color photograph, by the way, to a pretty striking dynamic black and white photograph. Okay, I think I will move on from that just to free up the space. Okay, so let's go here because invariably, I'll be able to speak. I get asked about this all the time because it goes back to a Cuba car scene I did a long time ago, and it's probably one of the most requested. How did you do that when I'm doing a workshop, what have you? Anyways. I want to show you this transparency capability inside of black and white effects. So let's go here. Let's go to black and white effects. And we're not going to spend near as much time this time, but we're just going to give you another creative thought to add to that, add to the quiver, if you will, of ideas that you'll have. Okay. So let's go ahead and reset. This basically, by the way, it's sticky settings in most every Topaz product, meaning it's going to remember exactly what you did the last time, so that if you're coming back and doing another one in a series, you can apply it easily. By the way, almost every single program they have, you can make a preset. And those are good little webinars that Nicole does, much shorter than this one. If you want to learn about specific things like making presets, that'd be a good way to do it. I'm going to hit reset on this. I'm going to just do a quick conversion to something like this. I'm not going to spend much time on the conversion process. What I want to do is remind you of this cool little tool that I use a lot. There's two of them actually. So underneath the finishing touches, right side again, if I click on the transparency and I slide it over, look how cool that look is. Hopefully you remember that's not near what it looked like as a regular color photograph. I'll show you that in a minute. So the point of what I just said is the transparency slider is not like an opacity slider really, because it's not going, when you pull it all the way to 1, it's not bringing you back to 100% of the original photograph. It's something other than that, and it just gives you this really awesome old school photo look. And you can bring it down and make it even more subdued or subtle if you want here. The other one that I will use sometimes is under the creative effects. That's the next tab up. I like the diffusion. Come on, I hit the checkbox. Well, there we go. The diffusion, and let's check that on. And diffusion is just that. It gives you this really cool diffused look. You can feather that look to be something less than that. I like something like that, so let me turn that off so you can see that diffused look. And what I would tend to do, and I've done this in a previous webinar, if I use this, I tend to bring it back out and I'll use clarity after I do this, because the diffusion makes it a tad softer than I'd like it. By going in and using clarity, it brings back some of that sharpness, but still leaves some of that glow that's happening with the diffusion. So two really cool tools that you can use, and again, by way of just a reminder, go back up here to the conversion tab, go to adaptive exposure, use the regions and the adaptive exposure. Now we're talking, right? Now we're really singing. So pretty cool look right there. I love what that does. So adaptive exposure regions, quickly brought that thing together. We used a little bit of creative effects by using the diffusion, and then in the finishing touches tab I just went to transparency and I brought that over, so instead of a black and white photograph all the way over here, we've created another look. So hopefully that's a good one for you. I use it a ton. This is one of the main reasons I'll come into this product from Topaz, because I personally really dig this look, and hopefully you do too. Okay, I should have hit cancel. It's going to take a little longer than I'd hoped. Okay, let's now go here. Let's take a look at how we're doing here. What time is it? 5:36. Okay. One I didn't spend a lot of time on, and I wanted to not miss it this time, is something that's a little bit obscure, but it can be a lot of fun. So let me do it this way. Let's go into Fusion Express, and we're going to look at Restyle. And Restyle is a funky little program that's probably the least intuitive. So I'm going to try to make it a little more intuitive for you today. This is a church over in Italy that I snuck into and laid down on the floor pretty much and took a picture. So let's go to Restyle and just see if we can't demystify this a little bit and show you how much fun this can be. And it's in the spirit of this idea of an old world look, if you will, that we're looking for in this. Okay. Hit reset again, as I like to do. Let's go all the way back to the original picture. So what do you have? You're trying to really restyle this into something completely different. Well, seeing as this was architecture, I'm going to go ahead and click the architecture collection at the top left. And then what I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm going to go to the grid here so that I can see what these funky things are that they're giving me for choices. Okay, so what you need to know is, and this is what makes this program a lot easier, you see on each of these there's a camera icon. If you can just remember that, it'll help you through this program. So we're going to pick a half a dozen that we like. So I'm going to click on the camera and keep coming down here. Peach Days, that's kind of cool. Let's hit that. Cameo Olive, that could be kind of funky. Let's keep coming down. There's one I want to get. Whoops, come on. I want to get down to here called Fawn something. Let's see if I can find that one. Fawn and Sand, I thought that was kind of interesting. Coffee Contrast. Okay, so let's say those are the ones I wanted to click. Now let's come to the top of this panel here, way at the top. And there's another camera icon right here, sort of in the middle. Hopefully you can see where I'm moving, right below the word Topaz Restyle. There's a folder with a camera. If I hit that, all that's going to show up on my display are the ones that I have just selected. That should make your life a whole lot easier to start with. So click the camera and then go to the top of that page and say, okay, I just want to see the ones that I have some interest in, and click on it. Now, here's the next thing you want to do. You say, okay, I like this tonality. I like this brownish tonality. See, I'm down on Fawn and Sand, and this darker brown. If I click on any tonality in these color bars, it's going to give me another group of choices that I can investigate. So I'm going to click on that color. Now, based on that color, it's giving me these. I'm going to click the camera again on a couple of these just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. Okay, so I like those three. Now I'm going to go to the top again to the folder where the camera is, and it's added those images. To me, that should demystify how do we use this to start drilling down to the looks that we like. Then it's a simple matter of saying, which one do I really like the most now? I kind of like this, let's do this sun washed. So we go from that to that with this restyle program. So here it is. That's the image I brought in. Here's the restyled image. Now, it gets really complicated. This hue is always going to be on the right side now. This hue, you can make this go really wonky with the hue slider. Okay, of course it didn't do it on that one. Isn't that the way it always goes? But you can bring in these funky colors. So be very careful. As a matter of fact, I'll just be honest with you. I rarely touch those hue sliders. I do what I just showed you. But what I will do is come over to the luminosity of these tonalities and start to make those lighter and darker. Okay? So these are taking the tonalities that already exist in this restyling and makes those darker and or lighter. Okay, so those benches, okay, see how I made the whole thing darker or lighter. And then of course you have the basic panel down here where you can make the whole thing a little warmer in tonality and the temperature or cooler. You can affect the tint and the saturation and the tone. And by the way, remember in Topaz Clarity, you had this tone panel. You have it here as well. So I can go to the histogram, top right. I can see that I'm clipping. I can come down here to the white, and I can pull this to the left a little bit and make sure it's not clipping. I can pull the black to the right to pull it away from the left side. And now I've taken care of my issues of blowing out the highlights and blocking up the shadows by using this tone panel here in the basic, or the tone section of the basic panel. And again, we go from something that looked like that, which is what it looked like in real life, to a stylized or a restyled photograph with restyle. So just think about that in your workflow as a possibility. I think it's a pretty cool program. Gosh, you know what? Scott said, you better have your granddaughter Abby in this webinar. I'm looking at my time. And Scott, I better at least get that picture up and say, that's my granddaughter Abby. I'm not going to have time, but I really want to show one last one. So we're going to do this pretty quickly. I'm going to open up this. By the way, Abby and this photograph were both photographed with the brand new Lens Baby Velvet 56. I am in total love with that lens. It creates a real soft glow. It's really, really tremendous. So if you're interested in that lens, I've done a blog post recently. What the heck's going on here? Why is that not opening up? I've done a blog post recently where I show the effect of that. So if you want to go out to the blog at some point, you can find that. Okay, what's going on? Let's try this one more time, folks. Sorry. Ah, there we go. Good. Okay, so it's already a very soft photograph because that's what the Lens Baby Velvet does. But I just want to quickly and finish up today's with a really wonderful piece of software called Impression. So Impression is a faux painting program. It's doing its job. It's going to dump it into Impression, and on the right side you're going to get all these previews of featured looks. I can click on that look and I can start to see what they might look like as colored pencil, in pasto, what have you. Some of these are way overdone. That one's maybe not quite as bad. This afternoon is going to be way too warm, but what I would encourage you to do is go up to the top and pick something and investigate these like painting. And I'm going to go to the painting one where it's not quite so in your face and over the top, and like Degas, let's go there, let's go Degas Dancers, something like that. A little more subdued in its look. And yes, these are the presets, and this is a slightly different interface, but what you need to be aware of is if I click on all of those sliders, it now gives me the ability to tweak the brush size, the paint volume, and all those things, which there's really no way to, in a webinar, to explain all of those. The best thing for you to do is bring up your own image and go through all of these and see what they do. The color and the lighting section do just that. They affect the overall hue, the overall saturation, and so forth. Those should be pretty self-explanatory. I can brighten this whole thing up a little bit if that's one I want to do. I can add or take away contrast, right? Those are pretty straightforward, basic adjustments. The real magic happens in here, but I would be remiss if I didn't give you a couple things to think about. Sorry about that. Down the bottom left, do not overlook these. I don't tend to like having it 100% effect. I would prefer to have the strength down. So they've given us a strength slider. Now in this case, the strength slider really is like an opacity slider. If I bring this down to 0, we're right back to the original photograph. But anywhere in between, I am blending the original photograph with the affected photograph. So now you can see some of that painterly effect, but it's not so heavy-handed. And it's just a personal feeling, but with a photograph, I'm not as drawn to a photograph looking like a painting. I would rather make it look like an effect that I've chosen that I've tweaked it to be. The other one that you're going to want to pay attention to is the blending modes. So you can do overlay and soft light, and you're going to get a slightly different look with that. You're not going to get quite so painterly. If I bring that all the way up to 100%, now I want 100% because that particular blend mode is giving me something completely different. So play and investigate with your blend modes. Investigate also your strength slider because that's going to allow you to happily blend between the original and the affected look. The reason I was going to use Abigail in this painting, I wanted to show you that you can use Impression for people. It works really well. The only thing that I would do is I would actually do a background layer like this. So I would bring it into Photoshop, I would bring it in as a background layer, and then I would duplicate that layer. I would then apply, and I'm just going to do that really quickly, I would apply that adjustment on that duplicate layer. It's doing the work in the background here, just give it a second. And then that would give me the ability, because this effect, if I did it, you really wouldn't want that on Abigail's eyes and mouth and in certain areas of a person because it looks way too painted. So I would do really quickly on this duplicate layer here, I would come to the bottom in Photoshop and I would click where I can make a layer mask, and that gives me this white box here in the layer. And then with a brush, and I tap the letter B in Photoshop, and that gives me a brush. I would make sure that I'm painting with the color black. I've got a whole video on this, and you can watch other webinars into a lot more detail on doing what I'm doing here. I'm going way too fast. But I would paint with the color black, and then I could remove some of that look from this petal and this petal. But think about it, the practical application is I would be removing that painterly look from Abigail's mouth and her eyes. Not all of it. Again, I would be painting with a low opacity brush, which you do in Photoshop up here, so that because if you got rid of the entire painterly look, it would look obvious. You just want to remove it a little bit at a time until you get a happy blend between the painting look and some detail of those eyes and the mouth and maybe even some of the hair back. Okay, Nicole, are you there?
I am. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
A lot of information, and one of our viewers said it was like a mini master class, so a lot of great information there.
That's good.
If you want to follow John and get updates on his blog as well as upcoming workshops, check out barclayphoto.com. There's a ton of information and some great resources and learning material.
And just if you don't mind, real quickly, I'm happy to take questions specifically that you have for me. Just go to the website, barclayphoto.com, and find my email or contact area. Happy to hear from you. Or on Facebook, a lot of times I'll get questions after a webinar on Facebook. I'm more than happy to do my best to get back to you on those as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
You bet.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great morning, evening, or afternoon wherever you are. And thank you again, John. Really appreciate you joining us.
You're welcome. Take good care, folks. Bye-bye now.
Bye.